Changing jobs can be an emotionally challenging experience. A 2021 survey from Yo found that only 3 in 10 Americans say they will stay in their current job once the pandemic subsides. Now that the pandemic is subsiding, what is that reality? It seems that more and more people are not only thinking about switching jobs, but switching careers entirely. This means they leave their current industry for a new one, or simply rethink what they find valuable in their current structure. Fintech, specifically, is an interesting case study. It's already an industry seeing a dramatic job growth with little indication of slowing down. In fact, the global fintech market is predicted to grow at a rate of almost 25% annually over the next couple of years. I'm Joe McIntyre, host of Back to Work, and on this episode, we're highlighting why more Americans are looking to jump into the fintech field from other careers and industries. Joining me for this episode is Ron Spadaro, recruiting team lead in Yo's Fintech Services Specialty Practice. Ron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Okay, let's jump into it. Generally speaking, in your eyes, as a recruiting team lead, why are people leaving their jobs during the pandemic?
Right. So I'd say many people have gained a sense of life is short. And now is the time to make the changes they've been putting off. Some are following their passions. Some are chasing higher pay. Some are looking for better quality of life or making lifestyle changes. Others have decided to retire perhaps a bit earlier than they planned. So lots of different reasons.
How do employers decipher whether a departing employee is simply looking for a change in scenery, or if the organization actually needs to rethink or improve their culture overall when it comes to their employees?
They have to listen more than ever. Employers should be conducting employer surveys, paying attention to employer reviews on sites like Glassdoor and others, and conducting exit interviews to understand the departures and make the necessary changes.
Let's switch gears just a little bit. Many people have not just been changing jobs over the past 2+ years, but rather switching careers entirely. Why do you think that is?
We hear this all the time, and what I hear from candidates is they feel stuck, or they feel bored, or they're just ready for a new career that is more interesting and challenging. In the tech space, many are driven by an always learning mentality. So they're always acquiring new skills, and they're open to new jobs where they can use as much of their knowledge as possible. So overall, I'd say the pandemic has inspired many people to follow their passions and in some cases, even reinvent themselves.
Now, fintech, your specialty here, is one of those career fields that has seen a dramatic growth over the past few years. Fintech careers combine expertise from roles such as business, marketing, communications, computer programming, and qualitative research, just to name a few. Do you think fintech is becoming such an appealing field to transition to since there is so much overlap and exploration of work?
Yes, fintech companies are disrupting other parts of the financial industry. So there's a natural migration of professionals who are drawn to that growth, and they are helping these fintech companies scale up to the next level. The employees, they like the startup culture, they like the higher pay, and they like the idea of building something unique that really have the power to drive change.
Now, in a time where millennials are switching careers much more than previous generations, why is fintech, in your eyes, one of the go-to careers people switch to? You mentioned it a little bit there, but maybe dive a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah, specifically thinking about millennials and what drives them. Many are in search of an open or progressive corporate culture and and they place a high value on work-life balance. So they like that culture that many of the fintech companies offer. They also like companies that strive to make a difference in their customers' lives and maybe even challenge the status quo. So, for many fintech startup companies get it, and they offer all of that to millennials and more.
Now, from a candidate's perspective, is there a way to go about switching careers when you feel that the current industry or career you're in doesn't suit you as well as it used to, or as well as you thought it would?
Yes, I'd say this is very important for job seekers. They should always start with a goal. They should do some searching and ask themselves, where do I want my career path to lead? And what is the next step on that path? Always research the company and industry trends and make sure it's a great place for you to achieve your goals.
Now, what advice would you give to someone looking to transition into the fintech space? Let's say they're in another industry or another career, they're not too happy with it. How do they get into it? What skills are transferable?
Almost every skill out there is transferable to a job in fintech, from business services to IT. Some of the hottest job openings are for software and DevOps engineers, cloud engineers, architects, cybersecurity engineers, project managers, product owners, sales, marketing, and leadership roles from manager to CTO. Fintech companies are growing fast. They need every skill out there to grow and scale up and get to the next level. So, all useful.
You and your team, I'm sure, talk to candidates all the time and businesses in the fintech space all the time about getting new people into their companies. What are some of the challenges of switching to a career in fintech?
I think anybody looking at any startup, including many fintechs, they need to approach the job as being ready to roll up their sleeves. They have to like a startup company mentality. That means wear a lot of hats, be ready to take on a challenge. Um, Also, be confident in your ability to work independently. You shouldn't need a tremendous amount of guidance and support from others, but you should be open to collaborate very well within a team setting.
Now, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but from an organizational perspective, have you found that when an employee says they need a career change and tells their boss this or their supervisor this, it's a sign of a bigger issue with the company, or simply that they just may be in the wrong field? What's kind of the consensus there?
It could be either. It could be several reasons. For an employee and an employer together, the important thing is really to assess the situation, make sure the employees are in jobs that are fulfilling for them, and also, make sure that they are progressing along their chosen career path. So it's really a two-way street. The employer and the employee both have to invest time and energy to make sure they're in the right job and they're on the right path to move forward.
Sometimes employees who leave their company find that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Should those employees be allowed back to work for that company? What does it depend on? What are some of the risks to the employer and even the employee? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so we see a lot of movement, job to job throughout career, a lot of changes. Today, I think there's less stigma associated with job changes than there used to be. Candidates who are exposed to a broader base of experience often become more valuable to the employer. So it can be a good thing. It is important though, whenever someone is interviewing, talking about their career, they really do need to be prepared, to speak to any job transitions and explain reasons for leaving those jobs and making the change and how it fit into their overall plan.
Finally, what are some strategies for employers who want to keep talent in their workplace, in their workforce? I know it's difficult, more difficult than ever. As you just mentioned, people are looking to switch jobs at a very, very high rate. What are some strategies for employers to keep those people within their organization?
Yeah. So good question. I think sounds so simple, but I think often really not done well by several employers to really actively listen to your team, make them feel and see that you care about them, their job, their career, the whole picture. So employers need to take actions and implement policies that will make their company a great place to work. And they just really have to remember, when you invest in your employees, it is cheaper to invest in those employee retention programs rather than paying, to replace employees who leave, which can be very, very hard to do in this, current climate, and very expensive for employers who lose people. So take the time and invest in your employees up front.
Well, Ron, I want to thank you for joining us today and taking the time to highlight the opportunities and challenges of switching careers, especially in the growing fintech industry. Thank you also to our listeners for tuning into Yo's Back to Work podcast. To hear future episodes, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen in. For Yo's Back to Work, I'm Joe McIntyre. Thanks for listening.